I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you're stepping out onto a soccer training pitch. The floodlights are cutting through the evening mist, you're lacing up your boots, and you get to work.
Oh, yeah, the classic grind.
Right. And you do the exact same drills, the exact same running. You endure the exact same physical stress as the player standing right next to you. You put in the identical amount of sweat and tears for like 8 solid weeks.
Which is a long time in a training block.
It's huge. But at the end of it all, when the coaches actually test your fitness, your body has adapted completely differently than your teammates. And you're just left wondering, why does the exact same physical stress yield wildly different results?
It is, honestly, one of the most frustrating experiences for any athlete, and certainly for any coach trying to build a competitive roster. We naturally like to think of physical training as this simple, objective equation, right?
Yeah, input equals output.
Exactly. You put in the work, you get the result.
Mm-hmm.
But human physiology, as sports scientists are just constantly discovering, is, well, it's far from a simple equation. It's heavily influenced by variables we're really only just beginning to properly measure.
Which brings us right to the mission of our deep dive today. We were exploring a fascinating, honestly rigorously designed study that asks a really crucial question. How does biological sex influence physical performance adaptations to different types of training?
It's such an important topic.
It really is. We're getting into the academic weeds today, taking a look at a really compelling piece of sports science. But I promise you, the payoff is huge. Because whether you're a competitive athlete, a coach, or, I don't know, just someone trying to optimize your weekly gym routine.
Which is most of us, really.
Right. Understanding how differently bodies respond to the exact same workout is an absolute game changer.
The data we're looking at today is just incredibly revealing. It challenges some very fundamental, long-held assumptions we make about how to train teams. And frankly, how the fitness industry trains half the global population.
So let's lay out the source material formally, just so you know exactly what academic foundation we're drawing from here. We are analyzing a 2024 paper published in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine.
A great journal, by the way.
Oh, totally. And the title is Sex Influences the Extent of Physical Performance Adaptations in Response to Small-Sided Games and Running-Based High-Intensity Interval Training, a parallel study design involving men and women soccer players.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's authored by Jia He, Diao Liu, Wang, and Zhao.
That title is definitely a mouthful, but it's written with scientific clarity, and it tells us exactly what the researchers were investigating.
It does not bury the lead.
No, not at all. They are comparing two very distinct, highly utilized training methodologies that are basically the bread and butter of modern soccer conditioning. You've got HIIT, which stands for High Intensity Interval Training, and SSG, which stands for Small-Sided Games.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we get into the results and the specific, physiological differences between the men and women in the study, we really need to understand the dilemma coaches actually face on the ground.
Right, the practical side.
Yeah. Why are sports scientists so focused on comparing these two specific training methods in the first place?
Well, it really comes down to the realities of training athletes over a grueling, 9-month season. Let's start with HIIT. High-intensity interval training is exactly what it sounds like.
It's brutal, is what it is.
It is. It involves repeated, intense, maximum effort intervals, usually just straight-line running interspersed with strictly timed periods of rest. And from a pure physiological standpoint, HIIT is notoriously effective.
Like undeniably effective, right?
Oh, undeniably. It heavily taxes the aerobic metabolism, meaning it rapidly improves your cardiovascular engine and your stamina. It also forces the neuromuscular system to adapt, which is what improves your explosive speed and jumping ability.
So it sounds mathematically perfect. It triggers all the right biological switches. So, why isn't every team just doing HII all the time? Why do we even need an alternative?
Because, to be blunt, it is a psychological grind. Traditional running-based HII is incredibly linear. It's repetitive. You're just running back and forth across the field to the sound of a whistle or an electronic beep.
Which gets old really fast.
Exactly. And for soccer players, whose entire sport is based on creativity, spatial awareness, manipulating a ball, reacting to opponents, just running in straight lines without the ball, it can be deeply tedious.
Right.
It's highly effective at building fitness, but it can quickly drain the joy and the competitive spirit right out of a training session.
I actually like to think of HII as taking a highly efficient but chalky, bitter vitamin pill. You know it's going to make you stronger. You know it's mathematically engineered by scientists to give you exactly what your body needs to peak.
But you hate taking it.
Yes. Swallowing it every Tuesday and Thursday morning is just rough. And that brings us to the alternative that coaches absolutely love, which is small-sided games, or SSG.
Right.
We're talking about drills like 3-on-3 or 6-on-6 matches played on smaller, condensed pitches. And if HIAT is the chalky vitamin pill, FSGs are like sneaking your vegetables into a delicious sweet fruit smoothie.
That is a very accurate and honestly very practical way to look at it. The ultimate goal of a small-sided game is to mimic the physiological and locomotor demands of a real 90-minute match.
But without the boredom.
Precisely. It keeps the players deeply mentally engaged because they're actually playing the sport they love. You still get the high heart rate, you get the intense accelerations, the rapid changes of direction, the tackles, but it's all hidden within the context of the game.
And here's the core of the problem, right? This is the massive scientific blind spot that Jia He and this team of researchers identified.
What's fascinating here is that sports science has spent decades building a mountain of data proving that small-sided games work just as well as HIAT.
On paper, yeah.
Right. The established literature clearly shows that you can get those same physical adaptations, the aerobic boost, the top-end speed, the power, just by playing these chaotic mini-games. But there is a massive systemic catch to that literature.
Which is?
Almost all of that data, literally the foundation of modern soccer coaching, comes from studying men.
That fact completely blew my mind when I read the paper. I mean, the authors explicitly noted that prior to their research, there was only one known article published that explored this direct comparison between HIIT and small-sided games in women's soccer. Just one.
It is a glaring gap in the science. Women's soccer is growing exponentially in terms of global competitiveness, athletic standard, and professionalization.
Oh, totally. It's massive now.
Yet the physical training regimens and the periodization strategies are often just copied and pasted straight from the men's side. The underlying unspoken assumption has always been that a physiological stimulus, like a 3-on-3 game, will provoke the exact same degree of physical adaptation regardless of biological sex.
Which is wild to assume without testing it.
Exactly. And he and his colleagues recognized that in 2024, we actually need to test that assumption rigorously.
So how do you fairly test the chalky vitamin pill against the fruit smoothie across both sexes without introducing a ton of variables? Like, how did they set up this parallel study?
They designed a very strict, highly controlled 8-week intervention. They recruited 2 regional-level under-19 soccer teams. So that's 25 women and 27 men.
Okay, good sample size.
Yeah. And they took the women's team and randomly split it right down the middle. One half was assigned to the small-sided games group, the other half to the HIIT group. And they did the exact same randomized split with the men's team.
Now, to be clear, everyone is still doing their normal team practices, right? Like, they aren't just doing this one drill and going home.
Correct, yeah. They are all participating in their normal 4 technical and tactical sessions a week, plus they're playing a competitive match on the weekend. But twice a week, for an additional 24 minutes, they split up to do their assigned scientific intervention.
It's just 24 minutes.
Just 24 minutes. The HIT groups did intervals of intense running. Specifically, 15 seconds of all-out sprinting followed by 15 seconds of passive rest, just repeated over and over.
Sounds exhausting.
It is. And the SSG groups played small, continuous games like 3-on-3 or 6-on-6 on those condensed pitches.
Yeah.
And they maintained this routine for 8 solid weeks.
Okay, so to know if the smoothie or the pill worked better for each sex, the researchers needed a way to objectively measure basically the whole anatomy of a soccer player before and after this 8-week block.
Right, they needed solid metrics.
And they zeroed in on 4 specific performance metrics. Let's talk about the aerial threat first. Like, if you need a player who can elevate and win a header off a corner kick, how are they measuring that baseline power?
For that, they use the CMJ, or counter movement jump. It's a really classic biomechanical test. The athlete starts from a standing position, drops down quickly by bending their knees and hips, and immediately explodes upward to jump as high as possible vertically.
It's all about that sudden burst.
Exactly. It measures lower body muscular power and the nervous system's ability to utilize the stretch-shortening cycle of the muscles.
But, soccer isn't just jumping straight up in the penalty box. It's also about that breakaway speed. When a midfielder plays a perfect through ball, you need explosive acceleration to beat the defensive line.
Exactly. And that is measured by the 10-meter linear sprint test. It's a very straightforward assessment. It solely measures explosive, straight-line acceleration over a very short distance from a dead stop.
Right.
In soccer, it's about that initial, immediate burst of speed to gain a yard of separation.
Okay, but what about when the defender actually closes in on you? I see the third metric here is the COD deficit, which stands for change of direction deficit. I'm assuming a standard cone dribbling drill isn't enough here because you have to somehow mathematically separate pure straight line speed from actual, like, hip swiveling agility.
You've hit the nail on the head. A traditional change of direction test simply times how fast you can run 10 yards, turn around a cone, and run back.
Right, but fast runners naturally win that.
Yes. Your final time on that test is heavily influenced by how fast you are in a straight line. If you are incredibly fast but turn like a cruise ship, you might still get a good time.
That makes total sense.
So the COD deficit mathematically isolates the actual turning phase. It subtracts your linear sprint time from your total turn time. So it is a pure, unadulterated measure of your agility, your mechanical ability to slam on the brakes, pivot your hips, replant your foot, and accelerate in an entirely new direction.
And finally, the gas tank. The fourth metric is the VIFT, which stands for the final velocity at the 30-15 intermittent fitness test.
Ah, yes. This is a notoriously grueling aerobic capacity test. The players basically run shuttles across the field to a series of electronic beeps that get progressively, relentlessly faster, with short 15-second recovery walks in between.
The classic beep test vibes.
Exactly. It measures their absolute maximum aerobic capacity and, crucially, their ability to recover quickly between intense efforts. It essentially determines if your engine is big enough to still make an overlapping sprint in the 89th minute of a tough match.
Okay, so we have our four metrics. Lower body jumping power, explosive acceleration, pure agility, and aerobic stamina. But before we get to the results, I have to push back on the methodology here.
Go for it.
Because this is the first question that popped into my head when reading the setup. If you take a team of teenagers and you give half of them a highly competitive, super fun 3-on-3 game with a ball,
Right.
and you make the other half do agonizing wind sprints to a whistle, aren't the players in the small-sided game just going to have way more fun and maybe unconsciously coast a bit? Like, if the results end up being different, how do we know it's not simply because the pure physical effort levels were mismatched?
It is a critical question, and it's the exact reason why researchers conducting these types of ecological sports studies use a validated tool called the Borg CR10 Perceived Exertion Scale.
The Borg scale.
Yes, you cannot just assume effort in an experiment like this. You have to meticulously measure the athlete's internal perception of the load.
How does that actually work in practice, though? Do they just, like, ask them if they're tired?
It's more systematic than that. Exactly 5 minutes after these specific 24-minute training drills finish. So, before their heart rates fully settled, and before they moved on to any tactical practice, the researchers asked every single player to independently rate how intensely they felt they were working on a scale of 0 to 10.
Okay.
And the data they collected here is incredibly tight. Over the 16 total sessions, the men playing the fun small-sided games rated their exertion at an average of 8.2 out of 10.
Wow. Oh.
And the men doing the grueling HIIT, they also rated it at an 8.2.
Are you serious? So the perceived tax on the body was completely identical? What about the women?
The women playing small-sided games rated their exertion at an 8.1. The women doing the HIIT wind sprints rated it at an 8.3. Statistically speaking, across a multi-week study, there is practically zero difference there.
That is wild.
Both the men and the women, in both the game-based training and the purely running-based training, felt that they were pushing themselves to the exact same threshold of exhaustion. The perceived physical toll of the smoothie was identical to the vitamin pill.
All right, well, let's look at what happened when the whistle actually blew and the post-study tests were conducted. Because this is where the research turns from a standard sports science paper into something truly profound.
It really does.
The perceived effort was identical. The time spent training is identical, but the actual physical adaptations the players' bodies experienced after 8 weeks were drastically different depending on the training method and the player's biological sex.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the unifying factor. HIIT was essentially the great equalizer across the board, wasn't it?
It absolutely was. When you look at the high-intensity interval training groups, the physical adaptations were incredibly similar for both sexes. The structured, linear, unavoidable nature of HIIT stimulated highly positive physiological changes across all metrics.
Wow.
But particularly in that aerobic stamina metric, the VIFT, both men and women saw superb double-digit percentage improvements in their cardiovascular engine. The vitamin pill worked equally well and equally reliably for everyone who took it.
But then we look at the small-sided games, the smoothie, and this is the massive twist in the data. While the 3-on-3 and 6-on-6 games benefited both the men and the women, the sheer extent of the physical improvement heavily favored the men.
The contrast is stark. I mean, it's almost alarming when you dive into the raw numbers. Let's take the counter movement jump, that vital measure of explosive lower body power for winning headers.
Right.
After 8 weeks of small-sided games, the men's average jump height improved by a massive 27.4%.
Which is huge.
Exactly. But the women, playing the exact same format of games on the exact same pitch sizes, improved their jump height by only 11.4%.
That is well over double the improvement for the male athletes. And you see similarly dramatic trends across the other performance metrics too, right?
Yes.
Like the men in the game-based group saw a 5.1% improvement in their explosive 10-meter sprint times. The women in the game-based group, they saw only a 0.5% improvement. That is essentially a flat line.
It really is.
Statistically, their acceleration didn't improve at all.
And we see it again in the aerobic stamina test, the VIFT. The men playing games improved their engine by 12.2%. while the women improved by only 7.8%. Across the entire testing battery, the game-based training was simply a much more potent physiological stimulus for the male players than for the female players.
Despite both groups reporting the exact same 8 out of 10 level of physical exhaustion.
Exactly. That's the kicker.
So what does this all mean? We need to get into the why here. Why would playing a chaotic 3-on-3 minigame inherently favor male physiology over female physiology when it comes to, forcing the muscles and the nervous system to adapt and get fitter?
This is the crux of the issue. And the authors of the study are very scientifically careful to note that we need a lot more fundamental physiological research to map the exact muscular mechanisms at play here.
Of course.
But based on the data, they offer a highly compelling hypothesis. They believe it comes down to the complex locomotor and mechanical demands of open play, combined with how the physical chaos of a game naturally unfolds differently between the sexes.
Break that down for me. What exactly do we mean by the mechanical demands of open play?
Well, think about the biomechanical difference between running a 15-second sprint in a straight line on a track versus playing a desperate high-stakes game of 3-on-3 in a tight space.
Oh, they're totally different.
Right. In HIA, your movement is predictable. But in a game, your movements are entirely dictated by the unpredictable bounce of the ball, the positioning of your teammates, and the aggression of your opponents. You're constantly accelerating, abruptly decelerating, colliding shoulders, jumping off balance, and changing direction violently.
Right. It's entirely reactionary. You can't plan your next step.
Exactly. And the authors hypothesized that during these unscripted, chaotic mini-games, the men might naturally be generating a much higher volume of extremely high-intensity, explosive mechanical actions.
Even if the exhaustion is the same.
Yes. Even if the overall cardiovascular exhaustion, the heavy breathing, the lactic acid burn, feels exactly the same to both sexes, the men might be hitting significantly higher peak forces in their micro-movements.
So we're talking about like harder foot plants.
Harder, more violent foot plants, more aggressive deceleration forces to stop on a dime, and more rapid neuromuscular recruitment during the flow of play.
So it's not about how hard the heart is working, it's about the sheer violence of the muscle contractions during those split-second reactions.
Precisely. Those specific high-force mechanical stressors are what actually trigger deeper neuromuscular adaptations in the central nervous system.
Wow.
And that explains why the men saw such a massive 27% spike in their jump height and significantly faster sprint times from just playing games. Well, the women simply didn't receive enough absolute mechanical tension to trigger the same muscular upgrades.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting because, averages are great for academic papers and drawing broad scientific conclusions.
Sure.
But coaches do not coach averages. They coach a roster of individual human beings. And this study included individual data distribution charts that, frankly, should be required reading for any fitness professional. We have to talk about the non-responder problem.
Yes, the intra-individual variability. From a practical coaching standpoint, this is perhaps the most crucial insight from the entire paper.
Right.
When we say an intervention works on average, it successfully hides the reality that some individuals might see incredible, transformative gains, while others see absolutely nothing at all.
Let's look at that 10-meter sprint test again just to highlight this. In the women's small-sided games group, the average improvement was near 0. But when you look at the dots on the individual player charts, only 50% of the women improved their sprint time at all.
which is staggering.
It is. That means half of the women on that team went through 8 weeks of exhausting extra training, sweating and fighting in these games, and got absolutely zero benefit to their breakaway acceleration. Half the team were total non-responders to the game-based training. But what happened with the men in the exact same game group?
For the men playing small-sided games, 100% of them improved their sprint time. Every single player got definitively faster. And this massive variability trend held true across multiple metrics. For the women, the game-based training produced a wild, unpredictable, mixed bag of physical results from player to player.
It kind of feels like the fundamental issue here is that in a fluid game of soccer, you can unconsciously hide from the physical work.
Exactly. And we really have to look at the tactical reality of how the game is played to understand why they're hiding. Imagine a brilliant, highly experienced female center back participating in a 3-on-3 drill.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
She reads the geometry of the game perfectly. Because she anticipates exactly where the opponent's pass is going, she just steps in and intercepts the ball with a light, easy jog.
Right. Her tactical brilliance actually robs her of the physiological stimulus.
Yes, she doesn't need to do a desperate, physically agonizing, explosive 10-meter sprint to make a last-ditch tackle because her brain already solved the problem 3 seconds earlier.
That is so true.
She plays a great game, she wins the drill, but her neuromuscular system never reaches the absolute maximum threshold required to trigger physical adaptation. She gets punished physically for being smart tactically.
Oh, wow.
A game naturally allows for these different styles of play. HIIT completely removes that choice. In a structured interval sprint, you can't use your brain to skip the work. You run at maximum speed for 15 seconds, or you fail the drill. It forcibly mandates the physiological adaptation.
And the data proves that point beautifully. The fix for the women was clearly the HIIT training. When the researchers looked at the female athletes randomly assigned to the high-intensity interval training group, 84.6% improved their sprint time. And a full 100% of the women in the HII group improved their aerobic stamina scores.
That is the undeniable power of a highly structured, scientifically controlled intervention. It eliminates the variables.
I look at it like the difference between a scattergun and a sniper rifle.
Oh, I like that.
For the female players, the small-sided games acted like a scattergun. You fire it off into the roster, and you just hope you hit the target. Some players adapt, some players don't. It's highly variable and unpredictable based on their playstyle.
Right.
But the running-based HII acted like a sniper rifle. It was precise, it was ruthlessly controlled, and it ensured a highly consistent, guaranteed level of physical adaptation across almost the entire roster.
This is the vital takeaway for you listening right now. If you are designing a training program, whether you're a head coach managing a squad of 30 athletes, a physical therapist working on rehab protocols, or just someone trying to optimize your own limited time at the gym.
Which is tough enough as it is.
Seriously.
Yeah.
You have to recognize that ecological or game-based training leaves drastically more room for adaptation variability in women than in men. To guarantee uniform, team-wide fitness gains for a women's squad, this study strongly suggests that traditional running-based HIIA is the scientifically safer, far more reliable bet.
It's a truly fascinating conclusion, and it really shifts how we view physical preparation. To summarize what we've covered today, while small-sided games are an incredibly fun, deeply engaging, and highly effective training substitute for men yielding massive, roster-wide improvements in power and speed, the scientific data tells a fundamentally different story for women.
It absolutely does.
For female athletes, high-intensity interval training remains the superior, more reliable tool for ensuring consistent, across-the-board physical adaptations. The chalky vitamin pill might be much harder to swallow than the delicious smoothie, but for women looking for guaranteed athletic results, swallowing that pill is absolutely necessary.
The paper is just a landmark step in addressing the historical gender data gap in sports science. It definitively proves that we cannot simply assume that men and women will respond identically to the same environmental training stimuli.
No matter how similar their perceived effort is.
Exactly.
I highly encourage you to go read the full, fascinating article by Jia He and colleagues in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine. Seeing the complete data tables, those individual player variation charts we discussed, and the incredibly detailed methodology for yourself really brings these scientific concepts to life.
It's a great read.
And before we go, please remember to follow the channel and turn on your notifications so you never miss an upcoming deep dive into the research that shapes our world. We've got plenty more scientific explorations on the way.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. If our physical adaptations to play versus structured drills differ so wildly and significantly between sexes in a highly controlled, tightly monitored soccer context,
Right.
how much of our everyday mainstream fitness advice, popular workouts trending on social media, the standardized class structures at your local gym, is built entirely on assumptions that only ever bothered to test half the population?
It really makes you rethink what is actually happening when you step out onto that pitch or into that gym and do the exact same workout as the person next to you. The physical stress might be identical, but your body is writing its own entirely unique physiological story. Thanks for listening.